So, it's time for a book review, or a series of book reviews, once again covering the Rivers of London series. I have covered, to date, most of the novels, except for Stone and Sky, which I shall be covering shortly. But before that, there's a bunch of novellas that come out in between those, which I haven't covered in my big omnibus review lineups of the Rivers novels. So, these four novellas generally go outside of the UK. With the there's four novellas so far: The October Man, Winter's Gifts, What Abigail Did Last Summer, and The Masquerades of Spring. Of the four novellas, the first of them to come out was The October Man, which is the first, and to my knowledge, only one of the books that has, the only novella so far which has none of the previously established members of the Folly involved. And sets a trend for most of these, except for What Abigail Did Last Summer, being the exception here as well, of having the books be generally set outside of the UK. The October Man, in this case, is set in Germany, in the town of Trier, and follows Tobias Winter of the, I'm going to mangle this pronunciation, Abeltung KDA, which I believe the full title is, the full term being Abeltung Komplex und Diffus Angelegenheiten, or the Department for Complex and Unspecific Matters, or to put it another way, the German equivalent of the Folly. Complete with being part of the German police department, with the Bundeskriminalamt. And like the Folly, it is spectacularly understaffed for what it has to deal with effectively considering of like three people. And generally they do as described in the book. I'm going to minimize spoilers on this. So this is the oldest of the four books we're covering today, being almost 7 years old. I still don't want to spoil it. The KDA tends to handle like a lot of the stuff that's described in terms of what our main character, Bryce Winter, is dealing with is, I'd almost describe it as unexploded ordnance, is a polite way of putting it. Lingering magical crap from the two world wars, which messy stuff, but also like some of like really nasty stuff, but also some of it is like, there's a bunker or other like barn or some other place that has a whole bunch of files from dating back to World War II or earlier, and also there's a demon trap. But there's other weird crap to deal with. Winter has had to deal with, it's mentioned in the book that he has previously to deal with possessed automobiles, also vampires, among other nasty pieces of work. Also mentioned rank is a criminal commissar, Winter. So, Der Kommissar, indeed, he is Der Kommissar. The mystery for this one involves Trier, where there is a vineyard that is killing people, and he has or appears to be killing people, and he has to find out why. This leads to him investigating this and dealing with local genius decorum. Bears mentioning, I believe this is like the one of the novellas also that introduces a Rivers, Genius Decorum comes up in Winter's Gift, North American Genius Decorum comes up in Winter's Gifts, but this is like the one where it's specifically a river goddess. And later on, it gets, with Winter's Gifts, we definitely get more of a sense of like, okay, Aronovich stretching out more in terms of, okay, what forms are Genius Decori going to be taking in the course of the setting, and it's not all just river goddesses. It's part of the series being known as the Rivers of London. Like, yeah. Not going to get too much into spoilers here, and I'm going to be kind of brief because, again, these are short books. Like, October Man is under 200 pages long. These are novellas. Next one after this is we have Winter's Gifts, which puts us in not just the United States, but in Wisconsin, in the Great Lakes region, and follows Agent Reynolds. She is the FBI agent who was introduced in Whispers Underground, and she ends up over the course of like that book basically getting introduced to the magical world, and by Winter's Gifts, she is the FBI's one major agent for handling, as they call it in the UK, weird bollocks. But unlike Peter, she is not a practitioner. She can detect vestigia, but she doesn't know to cast any magic and doesn't really have any interest in learning, which is fine. We do get hints of the other practitioner groups in the books here. Not the librarians who are introduced in False Value, but I believe the gentleman from Virginia. Yes, not I believe the gentleman from Virginia do come up. Who this carries out the trend of the gentleman from Virginia being in the present day they're practically PMC, a private military corporation, but their history of sticking their head into things and messing things up more than doing more harm than good. And this definitely applies for the narrative of this one. In the case where the plot following a town in northern Wisconsin, which is getting clobbered by a supernatural blizzard. And with the story, because of the location and the history involved, Native American cultures are integral to the book's plot. And Aronovich does make an effort for Winter's Gifts to try and provide proper representation, but that said, I am approaching this from the perspective of being a white guy who genealogically stays generally within the Anglosphere. So I'm not, and when it moves out of the Anglosphere, it tends to get more in the Scandinavian direction rather than any indigenous population. So I cannot speak to how well Native American cultures are represented within the book. That is something for a indigenous voice to speak more directly about. But the cast is handled very well, and being this is a novella, we have a nice conservation narrative to make sure everyone gets sufficient page time, and we do get a little bit of Peter cameo appearance, as is a trend for this and the other of the more contemporary set books to provide additional exposition, since Peter has the Folly Library at his disposal, Agent Reynolds doesn't. And again, in this book, the librarians this was published, I believe, before the librarians were introduced, and even if they had been introduced, Agent Reynolds is not in contact with them. And with False Value, I don't believe Peter has made any introductions between the two groups yet. I could be wrong, or it could have happened off camera. This does make me look forward, I definitely came away from this wanting to pick up the copy of the Rivers of London North American source book, just to see how this fleshes things out. Next up is What Abigail Did That Summer, and as the title suggests, this book follows Abigail and goes back in the timeline to the events of Foxglove Summer, when Peter is out basically out in the countryside. Remember correctly, this is the one where Foxglove Summer is the one where, yes, Peter is out in rural Britain dealing with the changeling, and also a unicorn. And with this one, the narrative is focuses entirely on Abigail, who's a young black girl, adolescent black girl, and who has a very different perspective in multiple respects from where Peter's coming from. Peter, adult, police officer, he does have to work within the restrictions of how the London Metropolitan Police Department works, but on the other hand, he has a level of leniency and freedom to move and act that Abigail does not. On the other hand, what also makes the story interesting is Abigail is in good with the talking foxes, which means if you like the foxes, you're getting a lot of them in this book. Additionally, while Peter is, like, how to put this? There are three characters in fiction who I consider to be the most heavily committed to the concept of Peelian policing in its core fundamental principles and desire to see them through and see them realized in their operations. Nicholas Angel from Hot Fuzz, Sam Vimes from Discworld, and Peter Grant. On the other hand, Abigail, as a black teenage girl, is someone who is more likely to be racially profiled by the filth in her and have to face that with interactions with the police, and which has brought up multiple occasions that this has been the case. So while Peter, yes, grew up as a black man in London, he's also on the inside. Abigail is not, and is thus Peter's rose-tinted glasses are not present. So if you approach the other Rivers books in the context of this is kind of propaganda, this is not the case with Abigail. And the plot itself for this one involves the mysterious disappearance, then reappearance, and the disappearance again of a bunch of teenage boys and girls related to a haunted house near Hampstead Heath. And yes, that alliterates a lot. This had to have been deliberate by Aaron Amuch's part. And just for good measure, we have our other little quality connection here is the book is annotated by, it's not clear. It's the voice that, so the book is read by, it has two readers, one for Abigail and another for the annotator, with Colton Holbrook Smith doing the annotation. And it's not clear from the voice whether it's supposed to be Dr. Waleed or Professor Postmartin for the benefit of Agent Reynolds regarding particular Britishisms and that sort of thing. And sound a bit more like Dr. Waleed than Postmartin, but I could be wrong, because Waleed feels like he's going to be more in touch with a certain level of youth slang from his relatives than Postmartin is. Not helped by the fact that Postmartin and Waleed don't talk to each other very much, and not in the sense of like they don't get along, but in the sense that they don't get opportunities to interact. I kind of want Aronovich to have something where they meet and converse, so that Holbrook Smith can nail down the voices for the characters so that they sound appropriately different from each other. And finally, we have The Masquerades of Spring. And Masquerades of Spring is a historical novella set in the United States, but not in the present day, and not following Agent Reynolds, but rather is set in the 1920s following Augustus Gussie Berrycloth Young, who is a practitioner who, after a few minor he says minor pranks, has skipped out of London to the United States. Gussie comes from wealth, privilege, having previously been established that to be a practitioner in Britain historically has been the domain of people who are financially well off, generally able to afford to go to the nice schools. So in other words, Gussie's a bit of an upper-class twit. He is a closeted gay, possibly gender-fluid upper-class twit, but a underclass twit nonetheless. In other words, he is Bernie Wooster. He is magical gay Bernie Wooster. But being that this is Ben Aronovich, he is also really into jazz. And so he, in 1920s New York, is moving in and out of Harlem and has a boyfriend who is a black man with Lucy Gibbs, who is a copywriter and a music critic for various black-run newspapers. And so when problems occur, when the Folly in the UK ends up running into a situation with a magical saxophone that ends up leading Nightingale to investigate to come to New York to investigate. It is stated later at the strong behest of Molly. Then, Gussie and Lucy end up having to kind of be guides for Nightingales. They make their way through the 1920s Prohibition Harlem jazz scene with all that is around it, both musically and, because this is Prohibition, related to organized crime. Of these, Masquerades of Spring had a tougher start for me because Gussie is kind of an ass. It isn't until Nightingale and Lucian join the story and we have these contrasting influences that Gussie mellows out enough to be an enjoyable character to follow. That said, the stars of the story are, in a large respect, Harlem Nightingale. Indeed, we see a side of Nightingale here, partially because he is younger, kind of brasher, that we never see in the earlier novels, and I feel like if Peter found out about it, it would make some very interesting conversations. And additionally, Aronovich gives the level of research and respect to Harlem that he does to London. Include bringing up various historical figures and locations to give that sense of verisimilitude. That reminds the reader that 1920s Harlem and the Harlem Renaissance are bigger than Langston Hughes and the various other names that you probably learned about in English class in college or high school. And frankly, I came out of the book wanting another Gussie novel. Situation where hey, if Aronovich goes, I want to kind of shift Peter to the sidelines now that he's a parent and has kids and he's can't afford to take the kind of risk he did before. Outside of Abigail, okay, we're going to go back in time and follow Gussie. We're going to move to the United States and follow Agent Reynolds. I think those will make for very interesting stories. And I'm really interested in following for that matter, also, honestly, I did enjoy reading The Adventures of Tobias Winter in The October Man. So if we follow any of these characters are ones who I'd love to see revisited again and love to see more to the forefront. We'll get a bit more into Abigail when I discuss Stone and Sky later. There'll probably be a subsequent video, but otherwise, I really enjoyed what I saw and hope we get to see more of these characters in the future. Links to where you can pick these up are in the show notes.
Thank you very much for watching. If you enjoyed the show, please like and subscribe, and also consider backing my Patreon. Patreon backers get episodes up to 1 week early of this show and any future Let's Plays. Also, please consider backing my Ko-fi. Toss me a few bucks also helps support the show, and it's not a monthly obligation or anything like that.